Think that quarterback will throw for more than 300 yards? How about that receiver in Miami grabbing a touchdown? Check out DraftKings Pick 6, the newest way to compete against others and play fantasy football to win cash with DraftKings. Pick a player and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat like yards, touchdowns, catches, and more. Get your picks right, and you'll win cash. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code BALLERS. That's code BALLERS for new customers to play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits guaranteed, plus 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Offer expires 9/19, only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. One per new customer. Reward issued as $50 in non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 6 months. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at NFL.com/terms.
The DFS Studio is brought to you by DraftKings. Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Welcome back. We're on to week 2 here on the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I am joined, as always, by Matthew. How you feeling, Betz?
Overall, pretty good. I mean, it's good to get your feet wet. Week 1, came and went. There was a lot of fun football, but there's a lot of gross football, man. I mean, if it felt like you didn't have any points in your lineup, I mean, that's how a lot of us felt. I know the guys talked about on the main show what the stat was, but just like historically low passing touchdowns, low passing yardage in week 1, so it kind of made for a gross DFS slate in general. But I mean, hey, Penn State 2-0, Eagles are 1-0, your Falcons are 1. Oh wait, your Falcons aren't 1-0. So I'm happy. How are you feeling?
The Falcons can't hurt me. I can just say that. They can't hurt me anymore. I'm beyond that. And then you and I will have to have some type of fun wager that is very much skewed towards me this week because our teams are playing on Monday night.
Oh, that's right.
Maybe we'll do something special for our Discord people this week since you and I get to face it. I feel like, I could be wrong, but I feel like the Eagles and Falcons have played each other a ton at the beginning of the season. Like a couple years ago, they were the kickoff game. It was like Wentz and Ryan, and I feel like we played each other a lot, and I feel like you guys have won every single time.
See, I just have this vision in my head of Julio just going crazy against us every time. So obviously different team, and we'll see. But I don't think you're allowed to make any new wagers on this show until you pay out last week's loss. Just for the people that, we're here, that are with us, that are the OGs. We are, I think, respectful men that you'll pay a wager out if you lose. We may have made a water bet. Greg Dortch may have beat Michael Wilson. I'm not going to say if he did or didn't. That's for you to decide, Kyle. But you owe me a water bet.
See, I was talking about my touchdown-only league. That's the league I was referring to.
What was it? 1 catch, 5 yards, and a touchdown?
Yes. The Cardinals wide receivers
beat Greg Dortch, the king. So
his little dinky routes. He did get targeted a ton because they had 2 receptions on the outside for their entire team. Like, what was their plan? It wasn't throwing to Marv.
Yeah, and I was obviously excited about Trey McBride. He was my slate breaker last week. I think he saw 9 targets. If you told me he was going to get 9 targets in this game, I'd be like, okay, sign me up. But it didn't go as smoothly for Arizona as we thought.
On this episode, Betz and I will quickly kind of review last week. I read an article, a free article on the site every single week where I review my cash process. You can see the highs and lows. I'm going to be pretty transparent of here's what went right. Spoiler alert, my little 2v2 swap did not go so well. So I was kind of burned in cash. And we'll review and then we turn the page. It's Tuesday. It's early in the week. So we give you a first look at the slate, kind of talk about the games, what we like, and then our salary standouts. Then on Friday's episode, we will give you our locked-in cash picks and break down the games we like. This slate, I will say, is a little bit better than last week's, and we're hoping for more scoring. I got last night moodied. Mad-eye moodied, as they say. I lost in a home league because Jake Moody went for 26.
That's crazy. I think if anyone played the showdown last night, which I played a couple lineups, I had one that cashed and you needed Moody. He outscored Jordan Mason, which is insane considering Jordan Mason hit the 100-yard bonus. So it was a captain kicker slate, and I lose on those every single time.
Yeah, that's just those things. I mean, this is what people will do. They'll go, look what happened here, therefore I need to use this. Now, Betz, I like to complain to you because I feel like you can hear my, pessimism, or at least my annoyance sometimes. But after week 1, it is very easy for us to connect the dots. This happened, therefore, this is what this means for the entire NFL for the rest of the season. I'm getting all of these people saying oh, look at what they did in preseason. This is what happens. There's also some good defenses out there, and I think defenses adjusted. So my first takeaway is that defenses, and I found the stat for it, they played more man, which is something you and I talked about. They should adjust to not just playing blanket cover 3 all the time. But I don't know. I just would say, before making too many assumptions about the NFL, and specifically DFS, don't just say this didn't work last week, therefore I'm going to swing the pendulum and go the other side. Or, man, I was really good in cash, I was bad in GPPs, or vice versa. I didn't have a great week in cash. It would be very easy for me to swing oh, well, I'm going to win it all back. I did have a good week in the prop streets, which we'll talk about, but any just quick advice to just tell people not to overreact in their process?
Yeah, it's 1 week, right? And anything can go sideways in a week. And I think the variance, it gets cranked up anytime throughout the year, but especially in week 1, where we talked about it last week. If people are, so tied to projections, which we preach, projections are helpful, you should be using them. But if you're so tied to them week 1 when the projections are the worst because we're going off of historical data.
Correct.
Coaching changes, new quarterbacks in different teams. There's so many things that are we need to adjust for. The projections are the worst they're going to be all year. So if you got off the board, you might have had an okay week. I mean, some of the chalk did pretty well, but a lot of the chalk failed. Evan Ingram, Drake London, a bunch of other guys.
Ingram is on my bad list right now.
So yeah, just in general, don't overreact to week 1. It's a 1-game sample. That's why we kind of said maybe go a little lighter than you're used to in week 1. And as we get rolling here, we'll be able to put some wins together. Yeah, I had a nice cash week. I had a terrible tournament week. I played a Lawrence team. I played a Baker team that did okay. It was a min cash. I didn't have the right running backs with it. And I had one other tournament team that just didn't have a chance, but it was a Kyler team. But, it's one of those things that you kind of learn to put that in your memory for next year for week 1. Again, we don't know what's going to happen. It's week 1. So don't be afraid to get off the board, I think, is the take home for week 1s in the future. But we'll just take the information we got, adjust, and move forward.
The process was right, was what he told his wife as he burned through their life savings and said, I'm going to deposit one more time.
As she drives away and you see the taillights. The process, honey, was right, okay? Which, we had one of those last night. I took a last minute props. I took a last minute Debo over. I was like, man, he's going to touch the ball so much with Christian McCaffrey out. He did, 15 opportunities. We needed 77.5 yards, finished with 77. So it was a fun sweat in Discord, but that was one that was hey, the process. The process was right. But they don't care about the process, Kyle. They just want the results.
I hedged last night emotionally by taking the over of Jake Moody. That cleared very quickly. And then I took the over of Garrett Wilson's first downs. On the first drive, he had 3. His line was 3.5. Do you want to guess how many first downs Garrett Wilson ended up with?
I think it's 3.
Yeah. After that first drive, he did not get another first down. So I was emotionally hedging in that way, and my bet still did not hit. After that first drive, I was like, oh, I'm going to clear this. Who cares if I win or lose? Yeah, it did not go so well. So, I would just say to tell people, usually we get to review our cash lineups, and you could read my article, but if you wanted to zag, it made sense. For us, our slate breakers did not work out so well. Tank Dell, Trey McBride. At tight end, honestly, it didn't really matter. You played Pitts, you were fine. Pitts was not great. He caught a touchdown, but he wasn't great. In tournaments, though, I feel like some of our calls and what we said, okay, Diggs is a good play. Diggs is a good play because people won't play him. Or in that game, if you wanted to shoot for the moon and get one of those, dart throw wide receivers, I played A.D. Mitchell. I didn't play Pierce. And you saw two of those with Mitchell they didn't hit. Jonathan Taylor is probably what hurt me the most in tournaments where I looked at the slate and I said, okay, people are playing Richardson. He got a touchdown. So that one kind of hurt me. Any other just like tournament plays that you're just like, this was almost there, but it didn't work out?
The A.D. Mitchell play is so painful. I played him as well. And I'm doing a little film review for Dynasty Show, which drops tomorrow. We'll record that later today with, I think it's Jason. And I went back and looked at Anthony Richardson because, man, the highlight with real throws to I almost said Antonio Pierce, to Alec Pierce, were just insane.
Antonio Pierce would never throw it that deep. He would punt it.
We'll talk about it. We're just insane. But there was a lot of pretty bad stuff too. And one of those was just a clear miss to A.D. Mitchell for a touchdown wide open. That one hurt. But yeah, man, it was a tricky week, I thought, for the reasons that we've already mentioned. But a good week nonetheless to get ready to, like I said, really get going here with DFS.
I remember texting you and saying, hey, okay, this is my last minute thought here, but I have a sneaky amount of Mike Evans. And you had a Mike Evans, I believe, in a tournament lineup as well. But
yep.
I had a lot of Evans. I just saw that people were playing Godwin. Godwin had a great game. We had him in as a cash play, but I wasn't on Baker. And if you're one of those people that double stacked the Buccaneers, or you just played Jaden and brought it back with Evans or Godwin, you had a good start on the field because the theory was Rachaad White is going to be super popular. Everyone's going to play him. So it's more of the theory part that I think I want people to understand is like White's popular. You play a stack to kind of gain leverage. And so Baker was just not somebody. Looking back now, it's like it was the Commanders. Why did we not play Baker stacks? But always looking back in hindsight, you sound so much smarter. If you want to get all of our picks, though, dfspass.com, and shoot them with the promo code Betz if they want to save a little quiche.
Oh, yes. The promo code, you guys are going to be shocked by what this promo code is. It's DFS Pod. It's DFS Pod. Use that. It's been the same one for the last, 4 years to save some money at checkout. Go to dfspass.com and use the promo code DFS Pod. Save some money so you can make some money.
Yep. We had some people that said, hey, I paid for all my leagues in 1 week. And I'm like, that's great. We're proud to be able to do that with you. All right, let's move on.
State of the main slate.
Each week, Betz and I refer to the lines at DraftKings Sportsbook Lines. It's where Betz and I play. You go to sportsbook.draftkings.com. We're going to preview the Week 2 slate, which is always funny when you and I start talking about it on a Monday. It's like we haven't actually turned the page, but for us to prepare for the show, we already got to know the matchups and know everything. Before we do that, I wanted to check in with a couple of wagers. I actually had a pretty good week in the props and the betting streets to kind of counteract some of my DFS losses. And I was on the show. I was there in Arizona, and Andy called his almost upset of the Cardinals and the Bills. So I took the Cardinals -6.5, and they covered.
Plus
so
6.5.
I had yes. Oh, +6.5. Sorry. But they covered the spread, and for a while it looked like, man, the Cardinals could win this outright. So that was great for me to kind of just say, I know Andy's given a homer pick, but he's been scary good with the almost upsets and covering the spread. So I just kind of leaned into it.
I mean, I just blindly bet them now. Why would you not, right? Until he just comes back down to earth, which I'm not sure will ever happen, I'm just betting literally every one and not even thinking twice about it. Yeah, he has such a gift for that.
Yeah, we need a company fund. I think I've shared that before. But literally, we're on the show, we're going through everything, and we're all just live betting it while Andy's still going through the matchups. So it's been pretty good. Make sure he doesn't give them out every single week, but the hit rate's been really, really good. All right, Betz, how did we do in props for DFS Pass?
Yeah, it was a really good week. We went 4 for 4 on the pick 6 plays on Friday's show, which was great. You had the James Cook over. I had the Josh Allen under. Kyron went under his receiving, and then you also took Caleb Williams under rushing. Thank goodness for kneel downs, huh? So funny. And then we went, I think it was 5-3 at the end of the week for a 1.28 unit profit in the DFS Pass. So a win's a win. We'll move on to week 2, but I also wanted to check in with our friends in Las Vegas, not the bookmakers and those guys, but Antonio Pierce, you have got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. It is the year 2024. You are lined up on the opponent's side of the field, down a touchdown with 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and you decide to punt the ball away. That is a fireable offense. Like, you cannot be doing that in the NFL at this time of the year, in the year 2024, where everyone knows, the nerds at home, you and me, everybody sitting on the couch on Sunday watching the games knows that that's the wrong decision. This is a $1 billion organization. Like, how can you be doing that? So I'm checking out my Raiders under, and I'm feeling great, knowing that they started 0-1 against the Chargers, and now they go on the road as a 9.5-point dog against Baltimore. Antonio Pierce, you got to be kidding me.
See, you didn't do your research because the Raiders punter is AJ Cole, who's been a 3-time Pro Bowler. Also, shout out Georgia boy, Woodward Academy. And so they have the best punt in the league. You use that when you can. When you need to punt.
You got to.
You got to do it.
Did you hear on the on the Monday night broadcast, the Jets were punting in one of their first couple drives. I don't know if it was Aikman or if it was Joe Buck, but he's like, man, Morstead, he had a great year last year. And it's like, yeah, no kidding. They punted on literally every drive at the Jets and Zach Wilson. So I just thought that was great. But yeah, I think the punter in Las Vegas he's going to be getting some work in this year.
Yeah, if your best player is your punter, or at least in the sense of like, man, his punting average, or man, the amount of punts this guy had this past year, he's awesome. It's like, no, your offense does not exist in the red zone. That's like they don't know how to exist there.
I was just like offended by it. It's like how is this happening? It's 2024, people. Come on, Antonio, get it together.
I'm so glad the Chargers came through. I took them in my survivor pool, and I was scared. I was like, week 1, the Chargers. Felt really good. Do you do survivor stuff?
I actually didn't do it this year. I've done it a couple times in the past, but just life got away from me, and I forgot to sign up.
Oh well. Basically, everybody picked the Bengals. It was like half the field's like gone.
Whoops.
It's great. Yeah. Let's take a quick break, and we'll talk about the slate. All right, for week 2, we have a big mama slate. We're talking 13 games here, and it's very crowded in the early window, only 3 in the afternoon. If you're one of those people that lives on the West Coast, you're like, what is this? Our East Coast life over here, Betz and our East Coast bros, it's just how it works. It starts at 1 o'clock. That's how football is. The early window is stacked. So this week is going to skew heavily towards, there's a ton of games, but there's also 2 really good games in the afternoon window. So approaching this, how are you looking at it? And give me the games that are like the top-notch ones so far.
Yeah, we've got the Rams taking on Arizona. Nice little divisional battle there. 50.5 total on that one. Tampa Bay going to Detroit. This is a rematch of the playoffs last year. That game total is sitting at 50. And then Cincinnati going to Kansas City. That total currently sitting at 48. So those kind of look like the top 3 game environments on the slate. You mentioned the morning or early and late window discrepancies. 2 of those 3 games that we just talked about are in the late window. So I think this is going to be an interesting week to kind of think about when we get to Friday and Saturday and Sunday morning, like how is the field playing those teams and kind of how can you adjust for late swap? Having that in the back of your mind, I think is going to be pretty key this week.
There's also 6 games that are 42 or below. So
gross.
There's some gross environments. We'll talk about the ones that you want to stay away from and which ones you can maybe do an onslaught stack. So in terms of team implied totals, it's the Lions at 29, the Chiefs at 27, Dallas, who I felt like that game was just so far off our radar last week. And no one really came through for Dallas for DFS purposes, but they're there, the 3rd highest team implied total. The 49ers, who was just playing on Monday night, and then Arizona and Baltimore at 25. So these 2 games that are sitting at the 50, they're going to be the most popular. So talk to me about the Rams and Cardinals and just your general overview.
Yeah, so when we got the news, actually, that Puka Nacua was going on IR with his PCL sprain, the line actually flipped. The Rams were favored by 1.5. Now Arizona is favored by 1.5, which I thought was pretty wild. That's a lot of points. Not that he's not important. Obviously, Puka's incredible, but that's a lot of points for one player for a wide receiver. You usually see that kind of flip for a quarterback, but did want to point that out that the betting markets are favoring Arizona now, which is really interesting. But with the Rams, I mean, with Puka out, there's so much usage to go around, and Cooper Kupp for his 21 targets is too cheap. Kyron's pretty cheap. We'll have a punt play in Colby Parkinson that's too cheap.
Tyjo.
That's right. Then you can pick up Tyler Johnson. You could throw in DeMarcus Robinson. You can maybe Jordan Whittington. Like, there's so many ways you could play it of just cheap options that I think that game is just going to be popular because of the total and the salary savings that it allows you to use. So I think it's popular for good reason with Arizona's defense not being quite that great. But it's one thing to consider, like when you build your lineups come this weekend and we're thinking about how much roster percentage is in that game, just be willing to get different elsewhere, I think, if you're going to play it.
Yeah, Tampa Bay Detroit is going to be a game that everybody wants to watch, and they will be playing. We saw what Tampa Bay did last week. Baker threw for 4 touchdowns. So this is going to be a popular game. Remember, these two teams played in the divisional round this past year, and Baker threw the ball 41 times. Goff threw it 43 times. There was a lot of passing volume, so I think there's a ton there. I did want to point out, we'll get to it in salary savings, salary standouts. Godwin's salary barely went up. It was like $200 or whatever. He led all wide receivers in EPA per target this past week. Godwin's a player that we've been kind of high on since moving back in the slot. So I feel like there's a lot of different ways to go in this game. I probably will stay away from Rachaad White just because I hate playing Rachaad White. You can play him in cash. Just hate the matchup and just think he's super inefficient. But man, Baker double stacks, Goff double stacks, I feel like are very much in play. And now we have Jameson Williams as kind of a fun play. Amon-Ra coming off a bad game where people be like, okay, do I want to pay up for that? So, man, it's just a lot to like in that game.
Yeah, and Tampa's actually dealing with a bunch of injuries in the secondary as well. Antoine Winfield Jr., their star safety, is going to miss this game most likely. They also got some other cornerback injuries, so it actually sets up very nicely for this game to go back and forth, especially with Detroit being able to throw the football. I think they will be able to. Yeah, the Rachaad White stat line last week, by the way, was just so classic. Like 15 rush attempts for like 35 yards or something, but adds like 60 yards receiving. Like that's just kind of what he does, which works on a PPR site, but against this Lions rush defense, I think it's going to be really tough sledding for him. We saw that with Kyron on Sunday night.
Did you see what my boy Bucky Irving did?
Yeah, he looks pretty good.
I'm telling you guys, people are sleeping on Bucky. Now, I brought him up on the Dynasty show as like, maybe this could work, but I'm very anti Rachaad White. Give me a sneaky game for this week, Betz.
All right, I'm going to throw out New Orleans at Dallas, and I want to kind of caution, like I could see this going either way, so it's not a strong conviction early in the week. But we saw a ton of pre-snap motion, which we've talked a lot about in the offseason with the Saints of saying, hey, if they bring that over and they get their guys in motion, like you get Rashid Shaheed in motion and let him go, it's not that easy to defend, right? And we saw a huge play against the Panthers. So it was just a very efficient offense. I liked what I saw. Thought they did a really good job of hiding some of the offensive line concerns in New Orleans. So if that sticks, maybe the market's underrating the Saints. Now, that said, I don't want to overreact to one game. It was the Panthers. The Panthers are the Panthers, and now they're going on the road to Dallas. So I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden we're like, oh, yeah, they turned into a pumpkin this week. But it's a 45.5-point total. Obviously, we like some of the pieces on Dallas. Marshawn Lattimore is dealing with the hamstring injury, which helps CD and Dak. So I think it's a fun one that could go back and forth. Obviously, it's played in a dome. So 45.5-point total is one I'll be watching throughout the week.
I'm saying the Giants at the Commanders. It's been bet up to 44. Both of these teams got waxed this past week, and I get it. Like, if you just want to say these teams stink, I don't want to be a part of them, that's fine. Washington's defense really might be that bad. I know Backwards Hat Dan came in saying, I want to run my scheme, do my thing. I mean, they were just destroyed through the air this past week. I think Neighbors is a great rebound candidate of the, hey, I need some more targets. And I'm just going to say it right now, just to be gross, Daniel Jones, if you want to stack him, this week, it's not the craziest thing you could do.
If there's ever a week where you're going to play him, it's this week, just because of Washington.
Do you remember last year the Giants got blown out in week 1? It was like, I think there was the Sunday night game. Maybe it was like 0-40.
It was the Cowboys game.
Do you remember what he did the next week?
I think he was the optimal quarterback against the Cardinals.
He was the QB1 on the week. So I'm not, that's just connecting some stupid dots, but it's more of saying, he stinks. This defense might be worse. Like, which is worse, Daniel Jones or the Washington defense?
Oh, that's pretty close.
It's a great competition for who's just really bad at their job.
I think it might be the defense, man. At least we've seen like a flash here and there from Daniel Jones. I mean, it's mostly been bad, but there's been a couple nice moments for fantasy. So I would say Washington defense probably worse.
Which game do you want to be underweight on this week?
So we've got Bo Nix against either Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. No, thank you. 37-point total. This Pittsburgh defense, and not a surprise to a lot of people, was a complete wrecking crew against the Falcons offense. And we talked about in the offseason, like that's kind of how Pittsburgh wants to win. That's how they want to play, is these gross, low-scoring games. On the Denver side, I was kind of optimistic that maybe we could see it get going with Bo Nix against Seattle, and it was just a slog in the first half, and when they got behind, they couldn't do anything. So, as is often the case with these Arthur Smith games, I think you'll see very, very low play volume because of how slow they play, how much they run the football. And then on the Denver side, there's just not enough weapons, and Bo Nix isn't there yet to really trust it. So 37-point total is one that I will be staying away from.
Oh, you don't like that Russ revenge?
I mean, if he even starts, I think it's going to be Justin Fields again.
Fields was not good. He was a JV quarterback out there, and yet he still beat the Falcons.
And he ran 14 times. By the way, like watching Russ be Russ is so painful right now.
The pads on?
Dude, you're inactive. You're not even playing at the game. He's on the sidelines wearing shoulder pads. I mean, fortunately, this time he didn't have his eye black on, which that would have been even more of a red flag. But the dude's wearing eye black in pictures. He's got his shoulder pads on the sideline. Like, Russ, just please be normal for once.
Oh, man.
Who do you think starts? Is it Fields or Russ?
I think Russ starts. But, you know the injury stuff better than me. I will say, if you rewatch that game, TJ Watt was everything in that game. Everything. Every single snap. My thought as a Falcons fan was, we are so screwed. We are so screwed before the snap of Kirk Cousins just chilling. By the way, we're not going to highlight that game. It's the Monday night game. You can, dunk on us a ton on Monday. But like Kirk Cousins and Achilles recovery and all of that, like it was like scary. Like this is like a man who should be like in a retirement home moving. That's what it was.
It was rough. But like, it's always so easy to say this in hindsight. And when you think about it in hindsight, it's like, oh, obviously, the first team offense barely played together, right? I mean, in practice they did, but they didn't play in the preseason. This is a new coaching staff, a new regime, all this stuff, new weapons for Kirk Cousins, new offensive linemen. So like, is it surprising it didn't go well? Not really. Which is why I was like terrified to play London and Pitts and cash together last week, because you're just putting all your eggs in one basket.
For sure.
But yeah, from a mobility standpoint, he did not look 100%. He's way behind Aaron Rodgers in the recovery process of the timeline, so it's not shocking. But personally, I thought it was worse than I thought it was going to be.
Cool. No, like I was looking at the schedule and I was like, okay, we're going to be like 0-4. 0-4. It's Eagles, and then it's like Chiefs and Saints. It's like, oh God, if we're 0-4, people are going to be screaming for Penix.
I was going to say, let's go down to hypothetical. They lose this weekend. Let's say they're 0-2, they're 0-3, maybe they're 1-3.
Yeah, just hypothetically lose.
Hypothetically, they lose on Monday night to the Eagles. How soon do we see Penix? Like, how bad does it have to go for Penix to get on the field?
Yeah, I mean, if we keep losing, then by mid-season, they're just going to be like, screw it.
Wow.
We got a backup plan. See, we told you guys there's a backup plan. Also,
the vibes
$100 million.
on the Falcons could not be worse. Oh, we're so back.
I don't even know if Darnell Mooney played in the game. That's how it feels.
Couldn't tell you.
I'll tell you, my best ball teams can tell you. They're not being helped right now.
Highest exposure wide receiver, baby. Go Kyle.
Oh, brother. He's on the field, they said. That's what they told me. And by they, me, Kyle, on this podcast said he'll be on this field. All right, game to be underweight. I'm going to say Chargers and Carolina. I think J.K. Dobbins is a tricky situation. If you look at the end of the game, you look at the box score, you go, wow, 135 yards. By the way, very happy for the man. Betz, you posted that video of his post-game speech. I mean, super happy for him. It was only 10 carries. And if you looked at half of them, they weren't great. So I expect him to be in a positive game script. I expect Gus Edwards to still 50-50 time split. People want to play J.K. Dobbins, by the way. They're going to want to. Carolina's offense is going to make this game awful to watch. Just dreadful. Jason posted all the Bryce Young dropbacks if you want to look at that. But a 39 total. I will not be chasing this game. I will not be chasing anybody in this game. sadly, I'm going to ignore it and just take the Chargers to win. Which team this week, Betz, are you most confident hits the over of their team implied total?
Let's stay in that game. And I know you said you're kind of ignoring it, but I can see 23 points from the Chargers this week, taking on a Panthers team that, I mean, top to bottom, has the worst roster in football. I think most people would agree with that. They just lost their stud defensive tackle, Derek Brown, to a meniscus injury, so their lone stud on defense is not going to play in this game. They might just have so many short fields with punting and turnovers and whatever that you look back, 24, 27 points is really not that shocking in this matchup against Carolina. So I would take the Chargers to score 23 plus points.
I think that Carolina and the way that people are sold with Dave Canales is basically he's going to fix a bunch of problems. They had a ton of problems coming in. That's the part that I think people don't realize. It's like, it's not just Bryce Young. It's a defense that doesn't have a pass rush anymore. Brian Burns is gone. Very few playmakers. Like, when I watched the film, their best wide receiver, just from me watching, it was Adam Thielen. Like, he actually looked like the best wide receiver. Sadly.
I didn't watch a ton of that game just because there wasn't much. There wasn't much to see on their side of the ball. But I believe you. I mean, he got off to a fast start last year, so maybe he does it again.
All right, I'm going to say the Giants hit their over. I know I talked about them earlier. It's 20.5. They were blown out last week. I would take the Giants money line right now on the road. And for DFS purposes, I think Daniel Jones' GPP is interesting. Neighbors, I'm going to go right back to. And I think Singletary's just going to see a ton of work. His usage was great last week, and he saw the targets. So I think Singletary is an interesting play. But I think the Giants, against the worst defense in the league, are at least I don't feel super confident. I actually trust Daboll. I don't trust Daniel Jones, but I like Daboll. I think he'll do fine. But I would take the Giants over in their team implied total. All right, which team are you confident hits the under of their team implied total?
I'm going to take the Raiders. 16.5 points doesn't feel like a lot, but they're going on the road, taking a Baltimore team that just came off a loss against Kansas City with extra time to prepare in that game. Man, week 1, they were 29th in EPA per play. Gardner Minshew dead last in air yards per attempt. This is going to spell trouble against this Ravens defense when they're on the road. So I will take under 16.5 this week for the Raiders.
I'm going to take the Titans under. Remember that first start with Levis? It was against the Falcons. He throws for 4 touchdowns. We think he's got upside. It's awesome. Since then, he's started 9 games. His completion percentage, 58%. Passing yards per game, 188. Total passing touchdowns in 9 games since then, 5. Okay? And those Titans teams in that span averaged 16 points. They were under in 7 of their 9. And the Jets defense, I know it was a Monday night. They didn't look great. The explosive pass plays are not going to exist. And the pressure rate is going to be elite. You've seen Will Levis under pressure. By the way, did you watch that game? Chicago and Tennessee?
I did.
Oh my gosh. That, like, the second half was basically Levis deciding that he wanted to throw the game away. Like, just completely imploding. He's not an NFL quarterback. We've said this for a while. He's super emotional. He's super high T when he runs the ball. Still wants to run people over. He's going to get destroyed.
Did you see the Callahan quote?
No.
He said, if we would have just punted on 1st and 10 every drive, maybe we would have won the game. I mean, come on, dude. Are you kidding me? That is such a
AKA,
bad...
I hate my quarterback. I hate
that
him.
Is
I hate what he did to me.
So bad. After week 1, just to put that out there of like, that's how I feel about my team. I thought that was hilarious, by the way. But yeah, it was rough. I mean, they had that game in hand. It just kind of threw it away. So yeah, I think the under makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Levis and Caleb Williams were 2 of the worst quarterbacks in the league this past week. They played each other, and their defenses were really the only thing that looked really good. I mean, the Titans' defense looked great, by the way.
Yeah.
They Keenan had the targets, didn't work out. It's okay. He's getting older. You know, don't blame him. Did he look fat to you?
He actually did not look fat to me.
Just slow and skinny.
Yeah, he was skinny, but man, he was slow.
Gosh, that's all right. I got a Chargers jersey, a Chargers signed jersey. When I was in Arizona, the Ballers just gave me one, and I was bringing it home, and my son goes, "Oh, that's Keenan Allen." Does he still play for the Chargers? I said no. And then he goes, oh, they probably don't want him anymore, do they? I go, nope, they definitely did not want him.
Sure don't, son.
All right, let's talk about some salary standouts.
Salary standouts.
All right, so if you haven't been with us before, on the Tuesday episode, all Betz and I are doing is just giving a lay of the land, talking about, hey, you know what? These are some players you should think about. You should put them in your pool. You should circle a little bit. We are not trying to say at the beginning of the week they're locked in, but there are some intriguing, things you can circle, especially stacking, to kind of just give your priors. So what I always tell people is whatever your gut reaction is on a Tuesday is good. You don't have to stay there, but don't ignore simple little matchup things. Now, we only have 1 week of data, so I'm going to talk about the Jaguars defense in a second. It's we can think that this is how it is, but they played completely different than anybody in the league in their first week, and it actually worked against Miami. So let's start at quarterback. Last week, it was Anthony Richardson and log out. That's what we said on our show, and in our best plays, he was our dude, and he balled out. He's on the road against Green Bay. Is he still the usage, the deep plays, the running, it's hard to get away? He's not expensive enough.
Yeah, they didn't really move his salary too much compared to last week. It's up a little, but for how much he can run and the willingness to throw the ball deep, it's a pretty tough combination to beat when you're thinking about floor-ceiling combination at quarterback. So, yeah, he's taking on Green Bay. He's on the road. That's not ideal. With Malik Willis on the other side, my concern for tournaments is just they put the ball in Josh Jacobs' belly 30 times in this game and play clock volume kind of comes down, but I just trust Shane Steichen to put this guy in a position to succeed. And going back to last week real quick, that was one of the things I was up until the hour before lock. I actually had a Fields team in for cash, but I just was going back and forth, and I was who do I trust? Do I trust Shane Steichen or do I trust Arthur Smith to put his guys in position to succeed? By the way, Justin Fields has no weapons besides George Pickens. I was okay, I'll go with A-Rich and go with that route. So one thing to also consider is just team environments and that kind of thing. Sorry to get us off track, but that's where I was at with A-Rich last week, and I think you could go right back to him. I don't mind Jaden Daniels at 6.2. Kind of a guy that I think his price will keep going up if he scrambles the way he does. 2 rushing touchdowns last week. You mentioned the over in that game, and then I'll also throw out probably more of a tournament play for me is Baker Mayfield at 5,900. Obviously coming off a great game last week. A dome matchup, you can throw on Detroit. It should be a pretty good back and forth affair there. My concern with these pocket passers, though, is just that if the touchdowns aren't there, you're disappointed. So it's one of those things that the floor is just a little lower.
I'm trying to figure out this slate, which mobile quarterback is in the best spot to just truly go off. Give me a 30-plus point game. And I like Kyler. I'm a sucker for Kyler because I feel like he's just going to stay in this spot. And I like Jaden. I love what we saw with Jaden. We'll talk about him on the Dynasty podcast from a film perspective. But A-Rich, Kyler, Jaden all give you what you want from a rushing floor perspective. Jaden's what's going to happen with Jaden one of these games is he's going to run for 50 or 60 and then just get crushed and get out of the game. I hate saying it, but he's going to get crushed. He's going to get knocked out. You played him in cash. He's going to get out that week. It's just going to eventually happen. But Jaden is always going to be a player that we're going to talk about. Eventually, his price is going to get up to $7K because this is way too cheap for what he's doing. Mahomes is interesting. I wanted to bring him up because $7K at home. Joe Burrow's kind of actually had his number for a while. So it's an intriguing matchup. But Mahomes at that price point, I feel like that's so much cheaper than we've ever had to start a season. So from a stacking perspective, you feel like Mahomes is a player that you will be interested in because the Bengals defense was not good either. And it's not good in general. They just had a good matchup in week 1 and they just failed.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing about Mahomes too, just from his roster percentage, he'll have some coverage this week. Lamar, I don't know how much people are going to play him, but he's at 7,700 on DraftKings. We just talked about Richardson. He's 200 cheaper than Mahomes. People are going to want to go down to Kyler. Like you said, go down to Jaden. So I think he's got some coverage in terms of what his roster percentage could be from a ceiling perspective. And then his stacking partners are pretty cheap. Rashee Rice, 6,700, is an awesome tag. We'll see if Hollywood plays. He's down in the 5Ks. Kelsey's cheaper than he usually is. Xavier Worthy's 6,100. It's not ideal for his role, even though he was electric in the game. He didn't really see a ton of usage. He just scored touchdowns. But there's so many ways you can stack him up, and his guys are pretty cheap. So, yeah, if that goes overlooked in tournaments in any way, I'll be all over it.
Yeah, people are going to be playing Baker. We talked about that game already. He's under 6K. Don't really need to go there. Goff will get the Dominator narrative every single week. Every single time that Jared Goff plays in a dome, which is like we've only heard 30 million times, 14 games this year, it will be, he's at home, he's in a dome, we can play Jared Goff. How did you think Goff looked? Like in that game, I felt like he had that bomb to JMO, and then everything else was kind of like, it felt off.
It did. They also went super run heavy. Like in overtime, it was like, just stop Dave Montgomery. Good luck. It was kind of weird, Montgomery's usage, by the way. It was like the first quarter was all Monty. Then like it felt like Montgomery wasn't on the field for like a quarter at least.
Like he split the red zone stuff, and Gibbs got
and Gibbs got a ton of drives inside. And then at the end it was Montgomery as the hammer to finish it out. So they went really run heavy. I think they just knew the Rams couldn't stop the run. So I thought Goff was fine. It wasn't his best game, obviously, but he'll have some ceiling performances too.
All right, let's go to running back. Pacheco is the first player that I had circled on here. He's below 7K. His usage was awesome in the first week. And this Bengals defense just got destroyed by Ramondre Stevenson. He led all running backs in yards after contact in week 1. So I feel like Pacheco is set up really well from a median outcome of looking at the game total is something we like. The defense is something that we can attack. He's a favorite, and he's below 7K. So I feel like usage-wise, he's one of the first players I look at for running back.
Yeah, he checks so many boxes. Favorite at home. I think it was 80-something% of the snaps. I think there's a chance we could see a little more Pirine, but not enough that it would really matter. And he's cheap enough that I think Pacheco's rock solid.
All right, so we got to talk about Derrick Henry. He fell in the end zone last week, but the third down stuff, the passing downs work was all Justice Hill. We kind of knew that. That's like how it was with Justice Hill last year, and it's how it was with Henry in Tennessee. But when Henry's favored, he's at home, he's against the Raiders, and he's 6.7. I mean, he goes from being a play that we go, we didn't like him in showdown week 1, 2. All right, I think you could play Derrick Henry in cash.
9.5 point home favorite against the Raiders sounds pretty good to me. Yeah, he's going to be game script dependent, and that's just always been the case with him. When it goes sideways and they get behind, you'll see Justice Hill. When they're favored, you're going to see 20 carries for Henry. And especially this week, coming off a game where Lamar had to run way more than I think they wanted, there's already some rumblings of he's not feeling 100% this week. And I think Harbaugh even said like that wasn't really the plan. So it makes so much sense that Henry is in for an awesome game this week at 6,700. I like him a lot.
Yeah, there's a bunch of 6K guys here. Pacheco 6.9, Henry 6.7, Jahmyr Gibbs in a great game environment at 6.6, Josh Jacobs at 6.5 because they don't really have a quarterback. They have somebody handing the ball off. You know that Malik Willis has never thrown a touchdown pass in the NFL?
Is that right?
Yep, 0.
Wow. That's crazy.
I'll look it up again just because when I say stuff like that, I feel like an idiot. But I feel like he hasn't thrown. By the way, another Georgia boy, Roswell High School. Let's see here. Yep, 0 passing touchdowns.
Well, that's sad. Yeah, I like Jacobs. I mean, the matchup's awesome considering what Joe Mixon just did last week. The concern for me on Green Bay just in general is Malik Willis and if they're going to sustain drives or not. So
his
I don't
52% completion percentage on his career.
You could say that's a positive for Jacobs' workload, but are they going to be able to, score enough points or be in the red zone enough with him? That's a major question mark. Matt LaFleur is awesome. I think he'll scheme up the best he can, but there's obviously some concerns. So for now, keep him in your pool, but there's a lot of ways where it goes sideways.
Yeah, dude, he's absurdly bad. Malik Willis is should not be in the league. It's shocking that he has a chance to start. Your boy Sean Clifford didn't even get a chance.
And Clifford was with the team last year, so he at least knows the playbook and the terminology and all that stuff.
He's
Malik
that
Willis,
bad, huh?
I guess so. He wasn't great towards the end at Penn State. But Malik Willis just got there like a week and a half ago. So I think you're going to see the most vanilla game plan of all time.
All right, 5K running backs. I mentioned Devin Singletary. Circle him at 5.7. J.K. Dobbins is going to be popular. And then this is probably going to be the lock of the week if we don't get other news, but we're recording this on Tuesday. Jordan Mason, you saw his Monday night performance. Really happy for him. 5.2. His salary didn't move. This is how things work with DraftKings. Whoever's in the Monday night game, they have to set the prices before. I don't think anybody knew that McCaffrey wasn't going to play. Apparently the 49ers don't really have a clear narrative how it works, but really happy for Jordan Mason, but he's only 5.2. He was awesome in that game. They play against the Vikings, but if McCaffrey doesn't play, I'm assuming Jordan Mason is going to approach 80% in cash.
Yeah, he'd just be the free square of in cash. You just play him and figure everything else out because he's too cheap for a CMC-esque role. I mean, 81% of the snaps, 70% route share is very good. Handled 28 of 37 backfield carries. The other ones went to Debo. So there really was no other running back involved. So they're favored against the Vikings. They're on the road on a shorter week, but still, I mean, 5,200 is just too cheap for this offense and his role. So if CMC was out, and we'll learn throughout the week, he would be in your cash game lineup for sure.
And this is more of just a good talking point, but like you look at a player like that and maybe like, okay, I don't think Jordan Mason can repeat it. In cash, if you know 60, 70, 80% of the field is going to play this person, you play him in cash. Like when the cards get turned over, you're pretty sure that most people are going to have Jordan Mason in a head-to-head or in a double-up. You cancel that out, okay? What we're trying to do in cash is make sure that the other person makes a mistake. So if you are the person out there, it's like, I'm not playing Jordan Mason because I don't really, like, do that in tournaments. That's what we said last week. Like, Andre Yoshivas, people are like, oh, he only got like 5 points. He was the free square. You knew the other person in head-to-heads was going to have him at his price point, so you can move on to the rest of your lineup. So realize this, when the field is that confident in cash in a player, you just play them and you don't worry about what they get. Like if there's some tight end that everybody's going to play at like 60%, you play the tight end, you move on. Now in tournaments, you get really different and you say, you know what, everybody's has Yoshivas as the 3K player. I'm going to get a little different. I'm going to play Alec Pierce and get weird. I did try to get weird. I had a couple of Trenton Irwin lineups in large field just to, pay up a little. It did not work, by the way.
Yeah, that's a very good point on those cash game plays that everyone's playing. And like you said, even if they fail in cash, it doesn't really matter just because everyone has them. So that's kind of the take-home point.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be back with wide receivers. All right, we're going to keep moving on salaries, standouts. Betz, first person you have on here is Cooper Kupp, playing at Arizona, who he has killed in the past. And by the way, he only saw 21 targets this past week. He's on pace for 300 and I think it was like 327 or something.
21 targets in that game on Sunday night. We probably can't expect that, but I think the floor is like 11 targets in this game without Puka, right? So yeah, I mean, Cooper Kupp at 7,600. It's a great matchup. No Puka, competing with Demarcus Robinson and Tyler Johnson for targets. Like that combo, Jordan Mason, Cooper Kupp, is going to be in everyone's cash lineup.
Yeah, my bad. 357 targets he's on pace for, Betz.
Oh, is that all?
Yeah. He was also like the first read on almost all of them, where it was just like, okay, we're designing this play. Here's a layup throw, and he's in motion, and we're going to throw to him.
And I think you're going to see that again because they've got some major offensive line issues. Do the Rams. So the game plan was, let's get the ball out quick. Where's Cooper Kupp? There he is. So you're going to see that a ton. And in a full PPR site, that's going to work.
All right. The most expensive guys at wide receiver, you're going to see Lamb, and we're kind of waiting on the Lattimore news. Not that that's the only thing. CeeDee Lamb moves all over the field, by the way. Justin Jefferson. And then I wanted to bring up Amon-Ra at 8.1. I feel like this is still a safe price, but let's say Amon-Ra last week, instead of doing what he did, which was not good, let's say that he went like 6 for 60. Do you feel like he would be one of the more popular plays on the slate?
Probably. I think so.
Yeah, I just think he's a strong play. And Jameson Williams is only 5.3, so he's going to gain a lot of steam in tournaments. I get that. But I think those two receivers, you just need to think consciously about how you're playing them. You can play them together. if you think that game goes off. But I think I have Amon-Ra circled. It's going to be hard to get him and Kupp in the same cash lineup, but I think Amon-Ra, I just want to give people the confidence. Rashee Rice at 6.7 is still too cheap for what he did. Do you think that you're going to be paying Kupp, Rice? I mean, because we're going to have to probably pay down at least one spot.
Yeah, I think the way that you can make that stuff work is if we do get Jordan Mason, and then you punt defense, you punt tight end, and you fill in with one of these like 3-ish K guys. Andre Oshivas, again, if T. Higgins is out, I know it wasn't ideal. He's only 3,800. He played a ton. I think we expect the offense to be better than they were in week 1. You talked about that, though, in the past, right? Like, Joe Burrow historically just starts slow.
Yes.
So, again, 3,800, you could do way worse. If you wanted to fit 2 Rams in, I'd be worried about that, though, or even 3 Rams is tough. We'll talk about Colby Parkinson. But just keep Tyler Johnson in your player pool at 3,300. He is so cheap, and he earned targets at a decent rate when Puka left that game. So you've got some punt options this week for sure.
Can I throw out a really nasty punt?
I saw this. I cannot even fathom.
I just wanted to give context.
I can't do it.
People love the dirty. Okay? They want the nastiness in their life. I want to talk about Devon Vele of the Broncos. You're like, oh, that guy plays football? Never heard of him before. Did you know he's older than DK Metcalf?
He is.
He's a rookie, by the way, people. For the Broncos, he had 8 targets, 8 receptions. They didn't amount to anything because Bo Nix can't throw it beyond 10 yards anyways. But if you wanted to punt, I don't think it's the craziest thing you could do. He's only 3.4 against Pittsburgh. This is what happens, though. You see a line from week 1, you go, ooh, I'll chase that. It's not a big gamble in cash. I would not think about playing that player at all in tournaments. Like, he's off my radar. But between Yoshi Voss, Tyler Johnson, and Devon Vele, or, dude, that dude's so old he could be your uncle. Uncle Devon. Those are the punt plays. I don't love it, but I just wanted to bring his name up. And then we can move on. You know, he's the only 26-year-old rookie wide receiver to ever get 8 receptions in his first game.
I would believe that.
Because they don't exist.
Exactly.
All right. In the 5K range, Malik Neighbors at 5.9, Chris Godwin at 6K. Those are probably our top options. So it's really going to come down to you taking Kupp, finding out in the 5-6K range who you want, and if you're going to punt. Now, if you're punting at wide receiver, I don't love also punting at tight end. It's just not my favorite thing. So, I don't know. Colby Parkinson is probably going to be the name that I cling to the most at 3.1. The Schoon Man, Luke Schoonmaker, is also somebody is 2.9 if Ferguson is out.
I was going to say it plays for the Cowboys, for people that aren't aware.
You know Luke Schoonmaker, truther?
He had some truthers, I think.
I think they took him in the second round, right?
They did.
And then they're like, hey, Ferguson, we like you. So those are the cheap tight ends. I want to bring up Bowers at 4.4. I think that's a solid price. And then Kelsey at 6.2. Any quick thoughts on tight end?
No, I think right now, early in the week, Parkinson's my favorite just because of the price and role that he saw last week. As the every down, no question tight end, 69 snaps out of 78. Ran 42 routes on 51 dropbacks, saw 5 targets. 5 to 6 targets at 3.1K for a tight end is good enough for me.
Yeah, people are going to ask Kupp and Parkinson in the same lineup. Sure, I don't care.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's a punt play. Now, Kupp, Tyler Johnson, and Colby, I can't do that.
Yeah, I agree. That's too many for me.
All right, let's go to defense. And usually I try to just barely even touch this section. I don't even care on this day. But I think there's actually some intriguing names on here. The Chargers are going to be a team that aren't as expensive as they should be against Bryce Young, 3.4. But I like the Jaguars. You have them on here too. They're at home against the Browns. That defense was really good. They created a ton of pressure in week 1. And they played a crazy... Did you see their percentage of man?
I did not.
It was 73%. It's different than the entire rest of the league. I mean, they flipped compared to what everyone else did. And it worked against Tyreek. It's actually something, shout out, in my 1,000 stats article, which no one read, that the one thing that did work against the Dolphins is people playing man. I know it sounds scary against Tyreek, but it worked overall against them last year. Baltimore did it, Kansas City did it, and you saw Jacksonville they were pretty successful. So I feel like against Deshaun Watson, the Jaguars are a solid play. I wish they were a little cheaper.
Yeah, I also wish they were going to have their top corner, Tyson Campbell, who's dealing with a hamstring injury.
Georgia boy.
So Georgia boy. I don't think he plays, but still, Deshaun Watson is broken. I mean, completely broken. So, and likely no David Njoku. Yeah, they're really interesting. I think for cash games, if I was going to make a choice right now, which we don't really do, but if you were, I would probably try to find the 300 just to play against Bryce Young. But for tournaments, if they're going to go overlooked, I think the Jaguars are very interesting.
All right, let me just go down a rabbit hole for just a second. We're almost done with this episode. But, okay, so that Cleveland-Jacksonville matchup, I was looking at, I was like, okay, is there some potential there? We know these offenses. Deshaun Watson last year against man coverage, okay, and that's what the Jaguars did. The highest rate by far. He targeted his first read against man coverage on 91% of his throws. Like, that is way over the top. The league average is more like 60-something, 65. So that's what he did last year. And I'm coupling this with something else. Who would you say is the only wide receiver worth targeting on the Browns?
Amari Cooper.
Okay, Amari Cooper's only 6.2. They might be without Tyson Campbell. They run a ton of man. Deshaun Watson targets his first read, and Amari Cooper is their best wide receiver against man. Connect the dots. Brian Windhorst style.
All right, so Cooper in a GPP, write that down. No, it's a good point. I don't think you need Watson with him.
Yeah, for sure.
But like Cooper as a one-off, that's really interesting.
Okay, just, early in the week, if it works out, I want credit. If it doesn't work out, you never heard it from me. Okay?
That's what we do.
Defensive upside, Green Bay is interesting at home against Anthony Richardson, who's going to always be volatile. I will be playing defenses against Anthony Richardson in tournaments this year, just if the field's overconfident. He could still have a great game. Like, Anthony Richardson could end up with 25 points in a game, and the defense playing him could also end up with 20-plus points just based on turnovers and volatility and all those things. So they're interesting. If you want to go below 3K, I think the Broncos against the Steelers are interesting. And then Detroit, I'm kind of interested in using them as leverage if you think they just take a hold of things on the ground and their defense creates turnovers. I mean, you saw the pass rush against Matthew Stafford, still elite. So those are the defenses, and I usually don't have any defensive takes early in the week, but be willing to get off the board, people, like in tournaments. Like last week, it was the Vikings. If you played the Vikings, they were a great one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had to pay up, but it made sense. That's going to do it. If you want to play with us, go to ballersdfs.com. You can be in our DraftKings League, Fantasy Footballers DFS, Borg, and Betz. You can enter a contest, so make sure you join the league, enter a contest. I know we had some people bets this past week that they were excited to play with people from the podcast, and then they won for the first time because it was a smaller setting they weren't used to. So, some of our contests are just 200 people or even smaller. So you're going to open one up for the Thursday night game, which is Bills-Dolphins.
Correct. Yeah, I'll have one up for that. I had one last week for Thursday, Friday, the main slate, Sunday night, and Monday night. So if there's a slate, you can come play with us.
Yep. And make sure you go to dfspass.com. Join us, Betz. Tell everyone bye.
Yeah, I hope everyone has a great week. We'll be back on Friday to break down the main slate. More picks, pick six, props, all that good stuff. Back on Friday. Have a great week. We will catch you guys then.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at thefantasyfootballers.com.